He's been trying to get rid of Obamacare because that was one of his campaign promises that he made. He did sign an executive order easing the penalty for individuals, and we can see he's having a very difficult time getting rid of Obamacare. And that is because they haven't really created a healthcare system that actually benefits the people. They were using this healthcare bill that they created when Obamacare was created, which was created by the insurance companies, and they were trying to pass this off as something new, which we knew right off the bat it was not. But we know that Obamacare is going to die because we're seeing out of the 25 exchanges, 13 of them have already gone bankrupt. Many of the states, well, they have maybe one decision or one policy they can get, or they have no decisions to make. They have no choices, I should say, of what to get here, and it is rapidly deteriorating very, very quickly. More and more individuals are taking the penalty instead of going with Obamacare because the premiums are so high. And we see that during the tensions over the debt ceiling discussions and the government shutdown concerns, Republicans continue to face the fact that passing an Obamacare alternative remains, well, unlikely at this time. But Trump is out there and he is saying that, well, Obamacare will die soon without any type of funding or anything like that, because we could see at this point he is just going to let it die away. And it will on its own, because we could see it already is. Now, the FBI, they refused to pay $50,000 for the Trump dossier. And they were dealing with the former MI6 agent Christopher Steele, which provided the FBI with a 35-page dossier. And of course, that went to McCain. McCain handed that off, and they said, yes, this is real. Of course, there was no proof whatsoever. There was no facts to back it up. And we could see right now that the FBI, well, they said, listen, if Christopher Steele can back up his claims, we will pay him $50,000 for the dossier. The FBI refused to pay the $50,000 because he couldn't back up any of the claims, which tells us right there and then something's not right. It was fake. But the FBI used the dossier for the foundation for a FISA warrant, which was made in September of 2016, which allowed the spying on the Trump campaign, where they spied on Carter Page. Now, in December, Trump's attorney, Donald McGahn, asked Mr. Page to stop holding himself out as an advisor to Donald Trump, as he had no role in the Trump campaign and was engaged in a limited capacity for one-time Foreign Policy Advisory Committee in March. Now, we can see right now that they were, at the time, spying on Carter Page because they did believe that he was part of the Trump campaign, and he was for a little period of time. And the FBI used the dossier, which had no fact, which they had no proof, but they used something that couldn't be proven as the evidence to get the FISA warrant, which is strange in itself, because they wouldn't even pay Christopher Steele the $50,000 because he couldn't back it up at all. And we know that the dossier is completely discredited. So why did the FBI use a discredited dossier to get the FISA warrant? This is the question. Where were they taking their orders from? And of course, most likely it was from the Obama administration, from Susan Rice and the rest. Because as we know, Susan Rice was one of the individuals that unmasked the individuals, the Americans, in the captured surveillance. Now, Trump and Jeff Sessions, they're doing something very interesting right now, which I completely do not agree with. They are looking to go after Julian Assange of WikiLeaks. Now, we need to remember back during Trump's campaign where Trump held up a piece of paper. Of course, it looks like it came from WikiLeaks. And he says, I love WikiLeaks. And you can hear him as plain as day say it. Now they're saying, well, we're going after WikiLeaks because of them leaking information. And we can see right now that this is a little concerning because, again, they're cracking down on WikiLeaks and they're using their First Amendment right. And we have to understand, why is this happening right now? Because during the campaign, Trump said he loved WikiLeaks, and now all of a sudden he doesn't love freedom of the press, getting the information out there. And this is concerning not just to every single person, but to news agencies also, because think about this. If he goes after WikiLeaks, what's going to stop him from going after other news agencies? And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Now, on Friday, the Trump administration, well, they asked Obama's pro-gun control Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, to resign. And Murthy was confirmed to the position of Surgeon General on December 5th, 2014. That led up to the confirmation vote on Murthy, focused on his political activism, particularly his positions on gun control. Now, he is replaced by Rear Admiral Sylvia Trent Adams. She was previously the Deputy Surgeon General, and we can see that he is making changes in this arena. And actually, this is a good sign because he's getting rid of the pro-gun control and Surgeon General, where he was pushing his agenda to take the weapons away from the vets, take weapons away from individuals, and we can see that things are changing in this realm here. Now, over the weekend, we had the French elections, and there were two candidates that came out on top. We had Macron and Le Pen, and we see right now they are going to be going against each other come May 7th, and we'll have to watch this very carefully because one is anti-EU, which is Le Pen. Macron is pro-EU, and if Le Pen should win, her first order of business is getting France out of the EU and installing a new franc and actually removing the sanctions from Russia. If Macron wins, he's going to stay with the EU. So again, we can see the EU has a vested interest in this. Russia has a vested interest in this, and we'll have to see what happens during May 7th, because if Le Pen does win the elections, other countries that are looking to get out of the EU, they're going to follow suit. Now, out in Afghanistan, we see General Mattis. He is visiting Afghanistan, and as he visited Kabul, we see there was an explosion at a U.S. base in Afghanistan. And we can see right now that the war has never ended in Afghanistan. It had nothing to do with freedom, democracy. Basically, what it had to do with is getting a strategic location, an oil pipeline built, and growing the poppies to pay for covert operations for the CIA and other intelligence agencies. And we see right now that troops are continually moving into Afghanistan to take control. But something very interesting happened. As Mattis arrived in Kabul, not just the explosion on a U.S. base, but we also had Afghan's Defense Minister Abdullah Habibi and Army Chief of Staff Qadam Shah Shahim. They both stepped down. And right now the Trump administration is holding a review on the strategy in dealing with Afghanistan, which is very interesting because we know in Afghanistan the Trump administration dropped the Moab weapon, the mother of all bombs, hit the CIA tunnels in the mountains of Afghanistan, and this is where the Islamic State was hidden. And we have to remember, the Islamic State was created by the CIA, by Mossad, by MI6. They're supported, they're funded by these groups. We know the CIA operates throughout Afghanistan because they use the poppy fields and they sell the opium out into the world to pay for their missions. And again, they're reviewing their mission. They're doing something completely different in Afghanistan, and we'll have to wait and see how this goes. Now, Trump is also in a high-level briefing on North Korea following an alleged U.S. citizen arrest in North Korea. Now, Trump is getting together with Chinese President Xi Jinping, with Japan's Prime Minister Abe, and they're both talking about what is going on in this area. Now, again, Trump is out there pushing the idea that China's President Xi Jinping, he is working with North Korea to calm the situation down. Now, again, who's making this situation a lot worse than it really should be? It's the United States. It's the deep state. They are continually provoking, and we need to remember that there were supposed to be all these aircraft carriers moving into the region of the Korean Peninsula, and there weren't any. Now we see there's two Japanese ships, the USS Carl Vinson. They are on their way to the Korean Peninsula. Now, South Korea is very angry when they heard that the aircraft carriers were not arriving like they said, and the leading presidential candidate has stated that South Korea will take charge of its own defense because of what happened with the aircraft carriers. Now, I believe that these aircraft carriers were never meant to go to the Korean Peninsula. They were being used as propaganda to feed into the deep state and their propaganda that they've been pushing out to the corporate media, because as we know, the corporate media doesn't check on anything. And we can see this is exactly what did happen. Now, of course, the White House, the Pentagon, they tried to explain this away, why the mix-up occurred. They didn't know where the ship was. Well, that's kind of ridiculous, because we knew where the ships were. We reported on it. We knew exactly where they were. And I think they were using propaganda to trap the deep state and trap the corporate media. Now, we need to look at the situation because things are rapidly changing. And to everyone that is out there, what is happening right now seems a little strange. It seems that maybe this is a secretive plan, or Trump has turned to the dark side. And again, we're looking at certain indicators to see what is really going on. Now, Iran was looking to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Russia backed Iran's membership, and we can see right now, because of the P5+1 talks and the UN sanctions being lifted, Iran can now join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And this actually made it possible because Trump came out and said that the U.S. has looked at the P5+1 deal, and Iran does comply with the deal. And it looks like Iran is moving ahead and going forth and joining the Shanghai Cooperation. So we can see at this point that things are changing. Even though Trump said that Iran wasn't living up to the spirit of the deal, they couldn't object to Iran complying with the deal, because as we know, the U.S. was not they were not complying with the deal because Iran is being inspected. Iran does not have nuclear weapons, and they are allowed to test defensive missile systems. That is not part of the deal whatsoever. Now, Iraq is out there, and they are asking for the United States to develop a financial plan for the reconstruction of the country after they completely destroyed it. Now, we know that the United States government central bankers, they created the Islamic State, they created Al-Qaeda, we invaded Iraq, we destroyed the infrastructure, and now Iraq wants the United States to pay for all of this, actually, which means the people need to pay for this. And they are referring to the Marshall Plan, passed by Congress in 1948, that saw the United States commit funds that eventually totaled over $12 billion, which is about $123 billion today, for the rebuilding of Western Europe ravaged by war. Iraq will need billions of dollars to rebuild after the Islamic State, which was created by the intelligence agencies of the United States, supported by MI6, Mossad, and many other organizations. And now they're asking, listen, you did all this damage, now you need to ante up and pay for all this, which means they're going to borrow money, which means the government is going to borrow money, which means the taxpayers are going to have to flip the bill. But this is what the central bankers like, because they get paid during the war, because the government has to borrow all this money to pay for the equipment, and then to rebuild, they have to borrow once again from the central bank, and this makes the central bank very happy, but it does not make the people happy. Now, Defense Secretary James Mattis, he is out in Yemen. He supports Saudi out there, and he is calling for more troops into that area. Now, we can see that Yemen never attacked Saudi Arabia. From the beginning, Saudi Arabia was being used as a proxy army for the United States government central bankers to go into Yemen to basically put back the puppet government, because the people of Yemen said, we don't want the puppet government anymore. We're seeing this happen in Libya. We're seeing it happen in Yemen. We're seeing it in Syria, where they're saying, we don't want your puppet government. And all these countries now are fighting back. Actually, Trump is out there saying that, you know what, hands off of Libya, let them decide themselves. And we're starting to see that things are changing a little bit at a time. Now, something very interesting is that the UN Watch, a human rights organization monitoring the performance of the United Nations, has strongly condemned the appointment of Saudi Arabia to the UN Commission on the Status of Women's Rights. Now, Saudi Arabia has poor women's rights record and widespread gender inequality. Why in the world would they be on this board? It makes no sense. Electing Saudi Arabia to protect women's rights is like making an arsonist into the town fire chief. That's how ridiculous this is. Now, Saudi Arabia was elected by a secret ballot last week by the UN's Economic and Social Council, having 54 nations as members. Saudi Arabia, along with Iraq, South Korea, and many other countries, has been elected for a 4-year term from 2018 to 2022 among the Asia-Pacific states. Now, which 5 EU countries voted for Saudi Arabia on the UN Women's Rights Commission? Do they have the guts to admit it? Remember, this was secret, so you don't know which countries did or did not vote for this. And out of these countries, the UK, Sweden, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, Germany, France, Finland, Estonia, Belgium, and many others, which ones voted for this? Very interesting. Because under Saudi Arabia's male guardianship system, adult women need permission from a male guardian, usually from a husband, father, brother, or son, to travel, marry, or exit prison. They may be asked to provide their guardian's consent to work or access health care. Authorities have long been promising to abolish this rule, but it never happened. We see that Russia, they are now testing their S-500, and what they're saying is that this new system, well, it's going to intercept objects in the non-dense layers of the atmosphere, including the upper layers of the atmosphere of about 62 miles from Earth. And this is unbelievable. And we see their S-300, their S-400. Well, the S-500 is way more advanced than those two systems put together. Now, the Syrian air defense units, they say they shot down a U.S. spy drone that was caught flying over Syrian airspace last week. The drone violated Syrian airspace. It was an MQ-1 Predator, and this was an American remotely piloted aircraft built by General Atomics. And the U.S. Army officials said, yes, they are confirmed that they did lose connection with the drone, and it looks like they shot it down. Putin says Russia is ready to show proof the chemical weapons attack in Syria was a false flag orchestrated by the U.S. as a pretext to another oil war invasion. Putin has been saying for years that he would rather work with the U.S. to defeat the Islamic State, but if that proves impossible, he has the evidence to prove the U.S. is implicated in this false flag, which is very interesting. So Putin calling on the international community to thoroughly investigate the use of chemical weapons in Khan Shaykhun and take appropriate action. Ask the world to be prepared for more chemical attacks. Putin suggests there'll be more false flags conducted to frame the Syrian government. Now, Assad is out there saying, listen, I'll have a ceasefire and I'll allow the inspectors to come in to inspect the entire area. I won't even fire on that area. And Russia is inviting them in. And the United States government central bankers, they don't want to probe anything. So instead of probing into this, the United States decided to do something completely different. The U.S. Treasury, Mnuchin, announced 271 employees of Syria's Scientific Studies and Research Center, they will be sanctioned in lieu of going into Syria and investigating what really happened, which should tell you right off the bat that they know exactly what happened and they don't want anyone to find out what happened. Now, these sanctions are absolutely meaningless. They're not going to do anything because they've been placing sanctions on Syria all along. They've been placing sanctions on Russia all along, and we can see that sanctions do not work. Now, there's a lot of propaganda out there, and one of the pieces of propaganda is that Russia, they are deploying ground troops in Syria. And we can see that the report really makes no sense. And where did this all start from? Well, it started from an Israeli news website, Ynet News, where they're saying that Russia had expressed willingness to deploy ground forces in Syria if Assad allowed it, which makes no sense because of two reasons. The Russian Special Operation Forces, they're already deployed in Syria. And number two, no reports from Moscow-linked media outlets appeared about any type of possibility of ground force deployment in Syria as of yet. So all of that, again, is complete propaganda to build it up that they're bringing in a lot more forces to make it look like that the United States government, central bankers, the coalition forces need to bring forces into this area. So what is going on here? Well, we have a battle between the deep state and their propaganda outlets and those individuals that are fighting against the deep state. Now, we need to go back in time during Trump's campaign where he continually called out the media as fake news. He called it fake news, CNN very, very fake news, and they continually published fake information about Trump. And then he had the problem with leakers within his administration and others, where they continually fed the corporate media all this different information. A lot of it didn't even come true, that he was creating this executive order, that executive order, and most of it didn't happen at all. The things he did do, and this is just some of them, he signed executive orders like the TTIP, where he got rid of the TTIP. He signed the executive order repealing Obamacare, where it would kind of help those individuals that are receiving penalties. We found out that the dossier was completely fake, phony, and false. They used the leaked information, the information that they received from spying on Trump, where they were unmasking individuals to get rid of Flynn. Then Trump said that Obama spied on him. Nunes received intel that there were certain people who could unmask Americans, and they called out Susan Rice on this, which was attached to the Obama administration. We find out that the FBI did have a FISA warrant, and they were looking at Carter Page and spying on him. And we see that Trump tried to repeal Obamacare, and it didn't work. He was trying to pass off the health insurance that was created by the Republicans, which was kind of a rewrite of Obamacare, which did not benefit the people whatsoever. Then the crazy stuff started to happen. Bannon was pushed out, and Kushner was brought in, and people are out there saying that Kushner is now advising Trump, and he's part of Israel, the Mossad. They have full control of him, and he is directing Trump in every move that he makes. True? Not true? We don't know yet. This is what we're hearing. So is Kushner part of the deep state? Maybe, maybe not. Then the corporate media kept on reporting about safe zones. Trump's writing up executive orders about how he's for safe zones and he wants safe zones. Those executive orders never appeared. Then we had the false flag chemical attack in Syria. Now, this happened during the period where a lot of information was coming out about the Obama administration and how he was spying on the Trump administration. And they were naming individuals that were unmasking American individuals. And then all of a sudden we had this false flag chemical attack, and the alternative media was out there saying that this was a complete false flag. So Trump decided to fire 59 Tomahawk missiles into Syria, and he did minimal damage to the airbase. Planes were flying about hours later. Later on, Putin makes an announcement saying, listen, we know that the deep state is going to be preparing more false flags where they're going to use chemical weapons. So he kind of stopped that right in its tracks. The corporate media saying, well, we're having a buildup of about 150,000 troops and they're going into Syria. Now, Mike Cernovich is saying that this invasion is going to take place on June 1st. Is this propaganda? Is this real? We don't know. But this is a good indicator, because if this does happen on June 1st, this tells us and moves Trump closer to the deep state portion. If it doesn't happen on June 1st, and I don't know why June 1st it would happen, because I would think that if it was going to happen, the way the deep state does operate, they would wait until Congress goes on break, and that is usually the end of July. And I would think, just like Obama did for the last couple of years, he would make his move on August 1st. So I would look at June 1st or August 1st for something to happen. Now, if it doesn't happen, we're going to chalk that up to propaganda. Then we had the North Korea incidents, where they were continually telling us that North Korea was testing nuclear weapons, and again, provided no proof whatsoever. A lot of propaganda. Then they had propaganda that China was bringing in 150,000 troops to the border, and that turned out to be propaganda. Again, Russia troops were mounting on the border. This reminds me of Ukraine, where they continually told us that Russia was bringing troops to the border. All of this is fake. Then Trump met with Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago. He didn't want to meet in the White House because too many leaks. Let's go someplace where I know it's secure, and let's talk about what's happening. He tweeted out that Xi Jinping is going to be handling what is happening in North Korea. He's going to calm everything down. Now, again, the corporate media has been using the propaganda quite a bit to make it seem like this small little fat kid is pointing to the US, Russia, China, South Korea, Australia, and all the other countries saying, listen, I'm going to attack all of you if you try anything, which makes no sense because he would be completely obliterated in 2 seconds. So why would he do this? He wouldn't. Now, then we know that the White House, the Pentagon, put out information about all these different carriers that were sailing to North Korea, the Ronald Reagan, the USS Nimitz, the Carl Vinson. That turned out to be completely fake. And the corporate media caught wind of this, and they said, okay, what is going on here? The Pentagon, the White House tried to, create some type of story, but now it looks like the USS Carl Vinson, because they were caught in the propaganda they were feeding to the corporate media. They were caught in this, and now what we see happening is that the USS Carl Vinson with 2 Japanese ships, they are heading towards this area. Now, Israel says that Assad has chemical weapons. Right before Mattis visited Israel, and then Mattis came out and said, yes, Assad, we believe that he has chemical weapons. So this came from Israel, which we know they give out a lot of fake information because they have their own agenda about what is going on in the Middle East, where they would like to have control of a lot of the Middle East. Now, Mattis is making his rounds in the Middle East, and things are happening. And before that time, we know that Trump dropped the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan on CIA tunnels on the Islamic State, which shows us that maybe he is going after the Islamic State and the CIA, those individuals that are trying to bring us to war. And then we had more propaganda come out about how Kushner and Ivanka, they are forcing him to go with global warming. He's going to be on that page. Well, that's propaganda. That didn't happen yet. Maybe things will change, but that did not happen. We also had the propaganda that he's going to reverse the TTIP. That didn't happen yet. So again, they're still putting out a lot of propaganda. So far, we've never seen any of this, so we're going to keep that in the propaganda section. We're going to put the 150,000 troops that are heading into Syria on June 1st in the propaganda section until it happens. Now, we know that Trump, he just removed the pro-gun Surgeon General, which is a good sign because we know that the deep state, they wanted to take weapons away from the people, and this is not going along with the plan. Then we hear that Trump and Jeff Sessions, they're talking about going after WikiLeaks for leaking information, completely against the First Amendment, and it makes no sense whatsoever, unless there's another plan involved here, because if they go after WikiLeaks, it will then allow them to go after news organizations. Again, I don't agree with this. This is against the First Amendment, unless the news organizations back up WikiLeaks because they don't want an investigation into their news organizations. Very interesting. Is this a strategy on the Trump administration where they're having secret meetings? Because right now, indicators that we're looking at right now is, are they actually going after WikiLeaks? Once they do that, are they going after corporate media, or are they forcing the corporate media to back WikiLeaks because they're afraid of what is going to happen? The other indicator we're looking at is what is happening in North Korea. What is Trump's next move? And June 1st, are there really 150,000 troops moving into Syria? Now, if these all come true, we can see that Trump has moved to the deep state. He's working for the deep state. If these remain propaganda, well, this might be part of a bigger plan. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.